I still remember standing outside my father's office door, trying to understand what I had just heard. My chest felt tight and my hands were shaking. For a moment, I thought maybe I misunderstood. Maybe there was some mistake. But the voices inside the room were clear. Linda was talking calmly, like everything was already decided. Marcus was there too, sounding confident, almost proud. Then my father spoke again, confirming the decision. The will had been changed. Everything that was once meant for me would now go to Marcus. I quietly stepped away before anyone noticed me listening. Walking down the hallway of the house I grew up in suddenly felt strange, like I didn't belong there anymore. Every room held memories of the life I thought I had with my father. Now those memories felt different. For years I had done everything he asked. I helped with the company whenever he needed me. I spent weekends learning the business instead of going out with friends. I believed that one day I would continue what my grandfather started and what my father expanded. But now it was clear that none of that mattered. That evening at dinner, I watched them closely. Marcus joked and laughed like nothing in the world could bother him. Linda kept smiling at my father, clearly satisfied. My father barely looked at me the entire night. Not one word about the decision. Not one explanation. It felt like I had already been pushed out of the family without anyone saying it directly. I went to my room early that night, but I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the conversation again and again. I kept asking myself one question. Why? What had I done to deserve this? The more I thought about it, the clearer one thing became. Waiting for fairness from them was pointless. If my future was no longer part of their plans, then I would have to create my own path. And the decision I made that night quietly started changing everything. A few years earlier, life in our house was simple and peaceful. My father and I spent a lot of time together. We had our own routines. On weekends we would work around the house, talk about the future, and sometimes go out for dinner after a long day. I always felt like I mattered to him. Things began to change after he met Linda. At first, he seemed happier than I had seen him in years. He said she brought joy back into his life. I wanted him to be happy, so I supported his decision when they decided to get married. Linda moved into our house not long after the wedding. With her came her son, Marcus Dalton. He was around my age, maybe a little older, and from the beginning he carried himself with a strange confidence. During the first few weeks, I tried to be welcoming. I helped Marcus move his things into the house. I showed him around the neighborhood and even offered to introduce him to some people I knew. I thought that if I made an effort, things would become easier for all of us. But Marcus never seemed interested in being friendly. He often ignored me or gave short answers whenever I tried to start a conversation. Sometimes he acted like I wasn't even there. When we were in the same room, there was always a feeling of tension that I couldn't explain. Linda, on the other hand, behaved politely when my father was around. She spoke kindly and acted like she cared about building a family. But when he left the room, her attitude would change. She would give me cold looks or speak in a tone that made it clear I wasn't important to her. Over time, I started noticing small changes in my father's behavior. He began listening more to Linda's opinions. Decisions that he once made on his own were now influenced by her suggestions. Marcus also started spending more time with him, even though he rarely showed interest in anything related to the family responsibilities. Slowly, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Without anyone saying it directly, I began feeling like a guest in the place that had always been my home. As months passed, the difference in how my father treated Marcus and me became impossible to ignore. Marcus started coming to the construction company sometimes, but he never stayed long. Most days he showed up late, walked around the site for a few minutes, and then disappeared before any real work started. The workers noticed it too, but nobody said anything because he was the boss's stepson. Even with that, my father always spoke highly of him. At dinner he would say things like Marcus had good instincts for business or that he had strong leadership potential. I would sit there quietly, wondering where those compliments were coming from. Meanwhile, my day started before sunrise and often ended late in the evening. I was at the construction sites checking materials, helping solve problems, and making sure the project stayed on schedule. I tried to handle everything carefully because I wanted the company to succeed. But when something small went wrong, the blame somehow reached me. If a delivery arrived late, my father questioned why I didn't handle it better. If a worker made a mistake, he asked why I didn't supervise more closely. It didn't matter that many things were outside my control. Linda always had something to say during those moments. She would speak calmly, suggesting that maybe I wasn't ready for serious responsibility. She often said Marcus had a more natural understanding of business decisions. Marcus never defended me. Instead, he usually sat there with a small smile, enjoying the situation. What hurt the most was watching my father agree with her again and again. The man who once trusted my judgment now doubted nearly everything I did. Conversations that used to feel supportive turned into lectures about what I was doing wrong. I kept pushing myself to work harder, thinking maybe things would improve if I proved my value. But deep down, I started to understand something difficult. No matter how much effort I gave, the way they saw me had already changed. And the family I believed would always stand beside me was slowly fading away. It happened on a quiet evening when I returned home later than usual. The house was calm, and most of the lights were off. As I walked down the hallway, I noticed the light inside my father's office was still on. The door was slightly open, and I could hear voices inside. At first, I didn't plan to stop. But when I heard Linda speaking seriously, I slowed down without thinking. She was explaining something to my father in a very calm and careful voice. She talked about the future and about making the right choices for the family. Then she began speaking about Marcus. She said Marcus had big plans and needed strong support to succeed. According to her, giving him full control of the family assets would help him build something important for the future. My father sounded unsure at first. His voice had hesitation, like he was still thinking about it. For a moment, I felt a small sense of relief. I thought maybe he would disagree. But Linda continued talking. She spoke about trust, loyalty, and about making decisions that would secure the family's future. Her words were slow and persuasive. There was a long silence after that. Then my father spoke again. His voice was quieter this time, almost tired. He said they should move forward and make the necessary changes. He mentioned contacting the lawyer soon to update the documents. Those words hit me harder than anything I had heard before. I stood there frozen in the hallway, trying to process what was happening. It felt strange hearing people decide something so important about my life while I stood only a few steps away. Neither of them knew I was there. Neither of them thought to talk to me about it first. For years, I believed my future was connected to the work I had been doing and the sacrifices I made. But in that moment, it became clear that the decision had already been made without me. I quietly stepped away from the door and walked back toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. In just a few minutes, everything I once believed about my place in the family had completely changed. The next morning, I couldn't keep pretending that nothing had happened. The conversation from the night before kept repeating in my mind. I knew I had to hear the truth directly from my father. After breakfast, I found him sitting in the living room reading some paperwork. Linda was nearby, and Marcus was leaning against the wall with his phone in his hand. I walked in and asked my father if we could talk. At first he looked confused, but then he put the papers down and waited for me to speak. I asked him a simple question. I asked if he had changed his will. For a moment, he looked surprised. Then his expression became serious. He said I was misunderstanding things and told me not to worry about matters that weren't final yet. His answer felt like he was trying to avoid the conversation. I told him clearly that I already knew what was being planned. The room became very quiet after that. My father took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair. After a long pause, he admitted that changes were being made. He said he believed it was the right decision for the future. I asked him if that meant everything would go to Marcus. He nodded slowly. Hearing him confirm it directly felt heavier than I expected. I looked around the room, thinking about everything connected to our family history. The house we lived in had been built by my grandfather many years ago. The company had grown through decades of hard work. All of it was now being placed in someone else's hands. I asked him why he believed this was fair. He didn't raise his voice or show anger. Instead, he spoke calmly, almost casually. He said I was capable of building my own life and didn't need to depend on what he owned. Those words stayed in the air for a moment. Behind him, Marcus stood quietly watching the conversation. There was a small smile on his face, like he was enjoying every second of it. At that moment, something inside me changed. I stopped expecting understanding from them. After that conversation, the house felt different. I moved through my days quietly, speaking only when necessary. No one seemed to question the change. To them, it probably looked like I had accepted the situation. I continued going to the company every morning and doing my usual tasks. I checked project reports, spoke with workers, and handled problems at the construction sites. From the outside, nothing about my routine looked unusual. But inside, my thinking had changed. Instead of trying to prove myself to my father, I started paying closer attention to how the business actually worked. I looked carefully at how contracts were negotiated, how suppliers were chosen, and how projects were managed from start to finish. Over the years I had learned many things while working there, but now I studied everything with a new purpose. In the evenings, I spent time reviewing old project files and financial records that I had access to. I wasn't doing anything wrong or dishonest. I simply wanted to understand every detail about how the company operated. The more I learned, the more confident I felt about my own abilities. I also began having longer conversations with some of the contractors and clients who had worked with us for years. Many of them respected the effort I had always put into the projects. They trusted me because they had seen how seriously I took the work. Those conversations made me realize something important. The connections I had built over time were real. People didn't value me because of my last name. They valued the way I handled responsibilities and solved problems when things became difficult. Slowly, an idea started forming in my mind. If I was capable of managing projects and building strong relationships with clients, then maybe my future didn't have to depend on the company my father controlled. I didn't share this idea with anyone in the house. There was no reason to talk about it yet. Instead, I stayed patient and focused. Step by step, I began preparing for a path that would belong entirely to me. And once that path was ready, everything would begin to change. One afternoon, after finishing a long meeting at a construction site, I stayed behind to review some final details with one of our longtime clients, Daniel Carter. He had worked with our company for many years and was known for investing in large building projects across the city. After the other workers left, Daniel asked if I had a few minutes to talk privately. His tone sounded serious, so I agreed and followed him to a quiet corner of the site. At first, he spoke about the project we had just completed. He said he appreciated how smoothly everything had been handled and that he respected the way I managed the team during difficult moments. Then he asked me a question I didn't expect. He asked if I planned to stay at my father's company forever. For a moment, I didn't know how to answer. I simply told him that I was focused on doing my job well and learning as much as I could. Daniel nodded, like he already understood more than I had said. Then he explained that he was planning several new construction developments in the coming years. These projects would require someone reliable to manage operations from the ground up. He said he had been watching how I worked for a long time. According to him, I was organized, calm under pressure, and able to solve problems quickly. Those qualities were exactly what he needed for the kind of projects he wanted to build. Then he made the offer. He said he was willing to start a new partnership for future developments, but only under one condition. I would have to lead the operations. Not represent my father's company. Not work under someone else. But build something new with him as a partner. For a moment, I stood there quietly, trying to process what he was saying. Opportunities like this didn't appear often, and the responsibility he was describing was huge. Daniel didn't rush me for an answer. He simply said he believed in people who proved themselves through hard work. As he left the site, I remained standing there, thinking carefully. For the first time, I could clearly see a door opening toward a completely different future. A few weeks after that conversation, I made my decision. I walked into my father's office one morning and told him I was leaving the company. I kept my voice calm and explained that I wanted to start something on my own. He looked surprised for a moment, but then his expression changed into something almost amused. He leaned back in his chair and asked if I really believed I could run a business by myself. I simply told him that I wanted to try. He didn't argue or try to stop me. Instead, he shrugged and said that everyone has to learn their lessons in life. His tone made it clear that he believed this decision would end badly for me. That evening at dinner, Marcus heard the news and laughed openly. He joked about how difficult the construction industry was and said that running a company wasn't something a single person could handle. Linda stayed quiet but watched the situation carefully. I didn't respond to any of it. I finished my meal and went back to preparing for the work ahead. Starting the new company was not easy. There were long days filled with planning, paperwork, and organizing small teams to handle the first projects. Every decision carried responsibility, and there was no one else to rely on. But slowly, things began to move forward. The first contract was completed successfully. Then another project followed not long after. Word spread among contractors and investors that the work was being done professionally and on time. Before long, more opportunities started appearing. Some of the same developers and clients who had worked with my father's company began contacting me directly for their new projects. They said they trusted the way I managed construction sites and believed the projects would be handled properly. As those deals moved forward, something else started happening. My father's company began losing contracts that it once handled easily. Projects that normally would have gone to him were now being offered elsewhere. He didn't understand what was changing in the market. But I already knew. Several months passed, and my days became busier than ever. My team was handling multiple projects at the same time, and the work required constant attention. Every morning started early, and most nights ended with reviewing plans and schedules for the next day. One afternoon, while I was in the middle of checking progress at a building site, my phone rang. When I looked at the screen, I saw my father's name. He rarely called me anymore, so the call immediately caught my attention. I answered, and his voice sounded tense. He asked if we could meet and talk in person. The way he spoke made it clear something serious was happening. I agreed and met him later that day at a small office near one of the downtown construction areas. When he walked in, he looked tired and frustrated. He sat down across from me and got straight to the point. He explained that several major projects had suddenly been cancelled or reassigned. Investors were becoming uncertain, and the company was facing problems he hadn't expected. For a moment he just sat there, rubbing his hands together as if trying to understand what was happening. Then he finally asked the question. He wanted to know if I had anything to do with the situation. I stayed calm and answered honestly. I told him that I hadn't interfered with his company or tried to damage his work in any way. I simply focused on building my own projects and delivering results for the people who trusted me. He listened quietly, but his expression showed that he was starting to understand the bigger picture. The industry is small, and word travels quickly when projects run smoothly. Developers often choose the teams they believe will finish the job without delays or unnecessary problems. That reputation had slowly grown around my work. While we were talking, Marcus entered the office. He had been waiting outside earlier but finally stepped in when the conversation became serious. For the first time since I had known him, he didn't look confident. Instead, he looked uncertain, like the situation was finally becoming real to him. A year passed, and everything had changed. My small team had grown into a full company with multiple ongoing projects. We were managing several developments at the same time, and our reputation in the city was strong. Clients trusted us because we delivered on time and handled every challenge professionally. Meanwhile, my father's company was struggling. Projects that had once been guaranteed were slipping away. Investors were hesitant, and deadlines were being missed. Marcus tried to take control, but his lack of experience quickly became obvious. He didn't understand how to negotiate contracts, manage workers, or handle unexpected problems on a construction site. Slowly, his confidence turned into frustration, and the people around him started losing trust. One evening, my father called me and asked to meet. The tone in his voice was different, there was hesitation, even nervousness. I agreed and met him at a small cafe, the same one we used to go to when I was a teenager. He arrived alone, looking older and more worn out than I had seen him in years. He sat down and apologized. He said he had made mistakes in the way he treated me, how he favored Marcus, and how he took decisions without considering my efforts or my future. For the first time, he admitted that he had underestimated me and the work I could do on my own. But by that point, things had already shifted. I didn't need his apology or his inheritance anymore. I had built something on my own, something strong, respected, and independent. The business he had tried to deny me had become a reality without his help, and that success was mine alone. I realized that the greatest revenge wasn't taking anything from them or trying to ruin their lives. The real victory was showing that I never needed their approval or support to succeed. As I left the cafe that night, I saw the look on my father's face. It wasn't anger or sadness, it was disbelief, mixed with respect he hadn't given me before. That expression, the moment he understood I had become stronger without him, is something I will never forget. It was proof that I had won in the only way that truly mattered.